Before the wedding, my boyfriend's ex-wife asked me to dinner. I figured she wanted to steal him back. Turns out, she told me that Richard only saw me as a baby machine. Later, he glared at my flat stomach from jail. Where's the kid? My boyfriend wanted me to ditch my grad school exams because I was pregnant. My mom rushed over from back home, crying and scolding me for being immature, while suggesting we meet my boyfriend's family to discuss marriage. I'm a mountain girl, born without urban privileges or broad views. Education got me out of the mountains. My degree is my ladder to climb up, yet the two people closest to me were blocking my path. My mom, an uneducated woman, believes marrying well is the best option. She thinks I'm shameless for living with a man, saying I should get married quick so she won't lose face back home. My boyfriend, whom I thought was mature and could guide me, also wants me to give it up. Said he'd support me later, no need for school anymore. I couldn't understand how someone so educated could say that. We had a cold war for a week until he swallowed his pride to come to me. Before, during our fights, I'd always be the one to apologize. This time, he held my hand and gently kissed it, saying he truly cares for me and the baby. And at 32, he feels old, even getting gray hair. Hopes I'll have this child. He promised I could still go to grad school after the baby's born, and he'd fully support me. With only 3 months until the grad exams, I didn't want to give up easily. I'm at an average college with no guaranteed grad school spot, but I decided to take the exam when I first got in. I attended every class, prepping from freshman year. Still, the grad exam is a future goal, not fixing my current issues. So daily, I worried about next month's expenses. Part-time gigs led to lots of friends, and we'd introduce each other to more work. Eventually, I did gigs outside school too. I met my boyfriend Richard at a business event. I was drawn to his maturity and grace from day one. I accepted his advances in less than a month. He slowly entered my life, even managing my gig choices. I didn't want his help, yet over time, I rarely did gigs outside school, holding on to my fragile pride. Richard's 10 years older, always taking care of me, almost filling that lack of fatherly love from my childhood. Yet it was always his way or the highway. I never told him about my grad school plans until 2 months into living together. He discovered my daily visits to the library were for studying. I remember he paused, then smiled, complimenting my ambition. Now he's dismissing everything, voiding the meaning of my efforts. I heard my inner faith shatter. I've thought about what he said, if I should compromise for the baby. Grad school can wait, a lost child can't be replaced. Recently, Wendy noticed my down mood. She's the only friend I can really talk to at school, and I needed that vent, someone to pull me up. After hearing me out, she asked, "You too good?" I said yes. Then she asked, "Are you sure he supports your school plans?" I was silent. Then she asked, "Did you use protection?" I said, without a doubt, yes. Something felt off. I was distracted, torn between grad school and the baby. But I couldn't figure out why Richard would block me, use a baby no less. Maybe it's real love, afraid I'd leave. That's all I could think of. To clear my mood, Richard took me to his hometown for some peace. It's a famous tourist spot. In nature's beauty, my worries lifted a bit. On the way back, Richard suggested visiting his parents, felt rude not to stop by. His parents weren't exactly warm, just polite. Didn't even offer me a drink, responded to my greetings rather coolly. Especially Richard's mom, whose arm had some red marks. I wanted to ask, but she stayed cold, so I hesitated and dropped it. The silence got awkward. I looked to Richard for help. After a reassuring pat, he told them I was pregnant. His parents exchanged a look, then smiled, deepening the wrinkles on their faces. Their demeanor flipped, showering me with attention, asking about my likes and dislikes. Their warmth was so overwhelming, I could barely sit still on the couch. When we eventually left, they said they'd move in to take care of me once their place was tidied up. Richard didn't give me a chance to reply and agreed outright, saying he'd feel better if someone was there to look after me. On the way back, I kept a stone-cold face. I knew he was using this pressure to make me submit. In the days that followed, I left early and came home late. Looking at the door felt like looking at a birdcage, and I was the sparrow about to be locked inside. I tried to empty my mind and focus solely on my studies, but my morning sickness made sure I couldn't ignore it. My mom kept bringing up the family's meeting, and coupled with Richard's focus on the baby, it chipped away at my defenses. I found myself gradually giving in to Richard, and the light of my dreams was dimming. When Richard's ex-wife called, I hesitated for a long time, but finally decided to meet her. She said she wanted me to see Richard for who he truly was. I knew Richard had been married, and I knew they divorced due to incompatibility. It was a mutual and peaceful split. Richard described her as intellectual and elegant, but too opinionated. Marriage, after all, is full of mundane things, and and two strong-willed people aren't suited for each other. I valued this relationship and was always gentle with Richard, like a vine wrapping around a tree. I didn't think there was anything about Richard the first didn't know, and I assumed she was there to win him back. For this meeting, I borrowed a classmate's makeup and dressed carefully. I didn't want to lose my poise in front of his ex-wife. The moment I saw her, I felt defeated. She was so confident, gentle, and composed, with an infectious smile. The only thing I had going for me was my early 20s. Maybe she thought I was juvenile and silly. Trying to act graceful, I sat down, ordered a milk tea, and gave what I thought was a flawless smile. "Hello, Miss Anna," I said. She smiled gently back. "Hello, I'm Richard's ex-wife. I heard you're pregnant. When are you planning on getting married?" My smile faltered for a second. "We haven't set a date yet." "Hope I'm not too late," she said. A sudden anger rose inside me, and I replied stiffly, "We'll make sure Richard sends you an invitation to the wedding." She chuckled softly and said, "Don't get me wrong, I'm here to reveal Richard's true nature to you." I looked at her, skepticism in my eyes. She took out her phone and some documents from her bag, setting them on the table. "This is my injury report and some video evidence," she said. Confused, I watched as she moved to sit beside me, offering me headphones and urging me to watch a video. The content shocked me, and I instinctively wanted to look away, but I forced myself to keep watching. In the video, Richard's face was twisted with rage as he pressed his leg against a woman on the ground, slapping her hard. "You filthy witch," he spat, then stood up and stepped on her face. The video's victim moaned in pain while Richard's face showed a bizarre satisfaction. In the end, he raised a chair and swung it down on the woman, as blood pooled beneath her amid horrifying screams. I tore the headphones off, my hands trembling as I covered my mouth. That couldn't be the Richard the first knew. He was always so gentle, respectful, and polite. Once I calmed down, I realized she was still holding my hand. I pulled away, grabbing my damp clothes. "Why show me this?" She lifted her hair to reveal a device, a hearing aid. Then she read from the documents, describing injuries and using terms I couldn't quite absorb. "Those second-degree disabilities stuck with me. Their family sees you as nothing but a baby-making tool," she concluded. I stumbled back home in a daze, the warm light by the door making me feel cold. Whatever her motives were, she had won the battle I thought I'd been fighting. I never told anyone I'd come from a single-parent home. Since early memory, I was scared of going home. Traveling long, arduous paths for school was my happiest time, away from insults labeling me a burden and the physical attacks, away from scrutiny treating me like an object on display. I was stubborn, never flinching when hit, my mom always shielding me. Back then, escaping wasn't an option. Endurance was all I had. My mom couldn't escape either, and her old bruises constantly gave way to fresh ones. I hated that man deeply, often wishing he dropped dead from some sudden illness. Maybe a higher power heard my prayers, because he did die unexpectedly, with no one even bothering to claim his body. He wasn't worth it. He was never a real father, and I had no reason to play the dutiful daughter. With Richard, I replayed every moment, wondering if someone could really hide their true self so completely. If so, it meant disguised violence was more terrifying than overt brutality. I couldn't face Richard and hovered by the door, listening to the increasingly loud argument inside. I heard my mom yelling, "My daughter can't just be given to you for nothing. $168,000 isn't a lot for you. Your BMW costs hundreds of thousands, right?" Richard's voice floated lightly, 10 grand, tops. "What, are you desperate?" I could practically see him, legs crossed, sipping tea, acting like everything was under control. What used to be his gentle guidance now felt like condescension toward me, the country bumpkin. Their haggling made me feel like a cabbage at the market. If Wendy heard this, she'd probably say, "A diamond-studded cabbage, huh?" Funny, I could still muster a laugh. By the time their argument cooled, my feet had gone numb. The living room was dimly lit, and my mom was sitting alone on the couch, wiping away tears. I held back my discomfort and asked, "What's wrong, Mom?" She gave me that "I can't believe you look" for a moment, then sighed and pushed past me to her room. The bedroom door was shut tight, with just a hint of dim light seeping through the crack. I pushed the door open and looked at the man lying on the bed with his back to me. I took a deep breath and said, "I don't want this child." Richard whipped around, veins bulging, his eyes wide. He grabbed me and pinned me to the bed, staring down at me fiercely. "Anna," he said, "the child stays." I suddenly remembered the image of Selena being beaten. Tears streamed down my face, soaking my hair and blurring my eyes. My hand, hidden, was digging into my palm until it bled. Seeing me like this, Richard lowered his head and licked the tears from my face, saying in a drippingly gentle voice, "It's okay, I was just trying to scare you. Don't say things like that again." I said okay, with a trembling voice. I used to always ask Richard why he liked me, and he always just smiled without saying anything. One time, he jokingly slapped my backside and said, "Probably because you're good for having kids. He's just a beast in human skin. Beasts don't deserve children. I'll make sure he experiences the depths of hell and knows true agony." The next day, my mom moved out. She can't read and is unfamiliar with the area, so the only work she could find was a temporary job doing odd jobs. I secretly watched as she, in her 50s, her face already lined with wrinkles, hunched over with a curved back, worked under the scorching sun. I squatted on the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. Soon, Richard's parents moved in, under the guise of taking care of me. We had a 3-bedroom apartment, so there was space to give my mom a room, but they made one of the rooms a storage room. They started changing my diet, making soups beneficial for pregnancy, trying to nourish me. Every time I swallowed something, it felt like I was swallowing their hopes for a grandchild. That furious, terrifying Richard seemed to be a one-time thing. Now, he was catering to my every need. It seemed like he wanted me to have this child under their careful watch, by any means necessary. I endured all this silently, feeling something take root and grow inside me. Days passed, and a month later Maria showed up with some photos. I met her while doing side jobs. She's a year older than me, and her family isn't well off either. We clicked immediately back then, and she took care of me, saying I reminded her of herself. Looking at Maria's phone, I saw photos and videos of Richard with other girls. I felt a burning shame. Maria had strongly advised against my relationship with Richard, but I went for it despite her warnings. I had noticed some signs previously. I trusted Richard completely, treating his words as gospel. But after talking with Selena and my mom, doubt started forming. I secretly checked his phone and found evidence of his cheating. Maria asked if I wanted to continue with this jerk. Internally, I knew some things needed to end and some grudges had to be settled. I called Selena. She said she could help me. She had escaped that hell and didn't want me to fall into it. It really was more than just a birdcage, it was hell. Just like we planned, I went home in the evening and told Richard's father that I was willing to have the child, but I wanted a big wedding. Richard's dad's face darkened immediately, saying a second wedding didn't need to be grand, just a few friends and family. While we were deadlocked, Richard came in. He patted my head and said, "Of course, my darling deserves the best." I tilted my chin up at Richard's dad and went back to my room. Richard hugged me, planting a big kiss on my cheek, looking so smug. "You finally understand," he said. "Let's live a good life, the three of us." I smiled and said okay, secretly wiping his slobber off my face. While I was planning how to refuse a marriage certificate, Richard, fiddling lazily with my fingers, said, "Honey, my mom picked a good date for the marriage certificate next August. We'll get it then, okay?" By then, the baby would already be born. It became clear to me I was just a tool for having kids, not even worthy of a marriage certificate. Even the wedding was a ploy to keep me on board. Richard's family sure had all this planned out. I took a deep breath and said, "If it's your mom's heartfelt wish, then we'll wait. As long as you, the older unmarried guy, aren't in a rush." He looked at me, teasing me for being petty. "It's for the best, really." With Selena's help, I also sent my mom back home, reassuring her she could come back for the wedding. There were only 2 months left until my grad school exams, and it was getting colder. No worries, after winter comes spring. Sometimes Richard would take me to his friends' gatherings. While relaxing, he'd suggest changing places to play mahjong. Richard's buddy, Sam, glanced at my belly and said, "Little girl, you've got some skills. You're really giving him a child." I knew he didn't think much of me. In the past, I'd struggle to reply without embarrassing myself, but today, I was just mentally working through problem-solving steps. If it wasn't to prepare for the perfect scene, I'd never have shown up here. I came today with a purpose, to confirm something I'd suspected. I realized Richard had a thing going with his friend's wife. It was disgusting, but it didn't surprise me. Looking back, all the signs were there. I hadn't noticed before, because they had grown up together, so naturally, they were close. For instance, I noticed the tangled legs under the mahjong table. I deliberately knocked my phone to the ground and caught them pulling their legs back in a hurry. Excellent, just great. This room full of people in suits and ties? I used to feel like we weren't even on the same level, but now, I see them as nothing but animals dressed in fabric, not worth being compared to real humans. I had already achieved my goal. At around 10, I left early, using the excuse that it was getting late. I purposely left my phone behind and then called Selena. I was on the other end, eavesdropping on their conversation. I heard Sam say, "Are you really gonna marry that country bumpkin? What do you like about her? Is it because she's so backward?" Then everyone burst out laughing. The laughter went on for quite a while. Then Richard's voice chimed in, "Just borrowing a womb to have a son. You know my family's been pushing me, especially since Selena's loss." By Selena, he meant his ex-wife, who was right beside me. To him, we were nothing but baby-making machines. He's only sweet-talking me because he wants me to have this baby. They were laughing again. "You won't get caught, will you? Even though that bumpkin isn't as backward as before, are you actually serious about her this time? You're thinking too much. Why don't you get someone from the city?" Well, college girls these days aren't that easy to get involved with. The one from the other day made a big deal about it, threatened to accuse me of assault. What a joke. If she actually wanted to report, she should have done it, not just told me. At this critical moment, we don't want any lawsuits. What's with us? Isn't this that bumpkin's phone? I hurriedly hung up, afraid they'd figure it out. Miss Selena asked me what I intended to do. After a moment of thought, I said, "He wants to break my wings? Even if it shames me, I'll ruin his path." Since I had very few classes left in my senior year and wasn't planning on grad school, I had plenty of time at home. Around noon, I was in the kitchen helping out with lunch. I'd been doing this since I was young, so I was pretty efficient at it. Richard's mom glanced at me. "You're better than Selena. Now I won't have so much to worry about. You'll definitely take good care of him." I unconsciously chopped harder. "Auntie, who's Selena? Richard's ex-wife? Why bring her up? Bad luck." Richard's dad got up and left. I watched as his coat disappeared through the door, then turned back and whispered, "Auntie, should I not have asked?" "There's no one, just someone he knew before," Richard's mom said, avoiding further discussion. "Auntie, could you tell me why they divorced? I want a lifelong relationship with Richard, and I don't want to make the same mistakes she did." I tried to appear humble and earnest. She beamed from ear to ear. "Well, of course. You're lucky my son wants you. She was his girlfriend during grad school, from out of town. Prettier than you, actually. But she had an air of arrogance, didn't know how to be filial, lazy and idle. Richard supported the family, yet she insisted on working. They constantly fought, and she ended up aborting the child. Such a cruel woman, such a wretch." Hearing this, I couldn't help but smirk internally. How they twist the truth. I know for a fact Richard was the one who beat the baby out of her. You can't do that. Once you have a kid, just stay home and take care of them. Why go through all that hardship? "I won't, Auntie. Finding Richard is the best thing in my life." I lowered my gaze and replied softly. Suddenly there was a loud knocking on the door. I got up to answer it and found a woman with red hair, big curls, and heavy makeup standing outside. She gave me a contemptuous look up and down, shoved past me, and sauntered in. Just as I thought she might be one of Richard's mistresses, she spoke. "Are you the country bumpkin sister-in-law my brother found for me?" I opened my mouth but couldn't say anything. So she was Richard's sister. Seeing my silence didn't bother her. She strutted into the kitchen, her hips swaying. While I was in the living room, replaying her disdainful country bumpkin comment in my head, I heard heated whispers from the kitchen. "She costs $168,000, out of their minds. Not a penny more. Once she has the baby, she's out. No way she's stepping into my house." "Mom, quiet down. If she hears and runs off, your grandson really will have to be found in the boonies." I know, but can't you get a proper boyfriend instead of always messing around? You're embarrassing me. Don't start that. Give me some money. I'm out." "Where would I get money, you useless girl?" "Fine, I'll tell Dad you gave Uncle money again." I noticed Richard's dad heading toward the bathroom. I quickly walked over. "Uncle, Auntie and Richard's sister are arguing. Could you step in?" His expression didn't change. He kept walking without a glance. "Mom, I just need $5,000. You gave Uncle $30,000. What do you think Dad will say if he finds out?" Richard's dad suddenly stopped, strode into the kitchen, and flung the door open. Through the gap, I saw him grab Richard's mom by the neck and slam her against the counter. "You wretched woman. Giving money to your useless brother? You think you can just take the family's money as you please?" "Dad, don't hit Mom. She didn't give it. I'm just messing around." I heard high-pitched screams and the sound of a slap from the kitchen. "So domestic violence runs in the family, huh? Evil folks always get their comeuppance." I rushed to my room and called Richard, sniffling. Some girl stormed in, started arguing with Auntie, and then Uncle went in and hit her. "I'm so scared." Richard didn't sound surprised at all. "If you're scared, just stay inside. I'll be back later." I kept clinging to the phone with Richard, too scared to hang up. He calmly reassured me, saying it was just his parents arguing and there was nothing to worry about. Right before the call ended, I heard a familiar female voice say, "Hurry up, Richard." Richard hadn't been home for a few days. I called once, but got no real answer. Now I realized there really was something going on. Sunlight shone through the glass, warming me up. Winter sunlight isn't as intense as summer's, but it still felt nice. I decided to text Selena. That night Richard came home. His mom's face was swollen, and she awkwardly explained they hit the wall arguing. Told me not to worry. I nodded understandingly and brought up the wedding money. I told Richard that back where I come from, it's supposed to be $16,800. It actually wasn't the case for everyone, but my mom asked for it with good intentions. He didn't even look up, just kept playing his game. Business is tough right now, lost a lot of money. I'll make it up to you later, he said. Plus, you need to eat well, and there's the wedding. Money's tight, wait a bit. His parents chimed in. Yeah, Richard's struggling now, but he'll make it up to you. I looked around. Richard wasn't taking me seriously. His dad had a stern face, and his mom looked at me with contempt. I said okay, for our future, but it must be made up to me later. He finally looked at me and sneered. Don't worry, you won't miss out on a penny. My phone went off. I went to the bathroom to read Selena's message. She convinced the girl Richard harassed. Finally, some good news. When I came out, I looked at Richard lounging on the sofa and felt disgusted. I used to be so blind. My classmates either found internships or were prepping for exams, but I felt stuck, like a bird trapped in a cage with two guards watching. I asked Richard to let me work at his company. Staying home was too boring. He gave me a strange look and said, sure, be the receptionist. The last one left, so you can take over. You're not prepping for exams anyway. What a jerk, rubbing salt in my wound. His company wasn't big, just about a dozen people. They handled some outsourced business work. When there was work, everyone hustled. Otherwise, folks just loafed around. I mostly sorted files, cleaned, and served tea and water. We agreed I wouldn't reveal our relationship, so Richard and I barely spoke. I quickly got to know a few coworkers. During a dinner outing, maybe because I seemed trustworthy, they let their guard down and said anything in front of me. They eventually talked about the previous receptionist. A coworker mentioned Richard harmed a sweet girl and had a video. Everyone laughed it off, like he was joking, but no one took it seriously. But I believed him. In vino veritas, they say. I shared the tip with Selena while picking up dinner. The video existed. Selena got it for $1,000. At first, we lacked evidence, but this made us more confident. The girl finally trusted us and shared some valuable intel. After nearly a month at the company, payday came, but no paycheck. Richard seemed in a bad mood. Some colleagues asked the accountant, who said to wait for Richard's word. The accountant, a plump middle-aged woman with glasses, raising a child alone, didn't talk much. From what I observed, she occasionally browsed job sites, hinting she might know something. Just as I planned to get closer to her, an unexpected guest arrived. When Sam came, I kept my head down, but he spotted me. He came over. So Richard put you here, real useful, huh? With that, he walked away, leaving colleagues puzzled and murmuring. Sure enough, during lunch, the chatter wasn't as relaxed. I informed Selena. It took a while, but she finally said, quit. We got what we needed. Staying's pointless. That night, I ranted about Sam to Richard, saying everyone knew about us and it made work uncomfortable. He comforted me, saying, fine, don't go. The wedding's soon. Good time to prepare. Reluctantly, I agreed. It allowed me to focus on other things. Before I knew it, the wedding day arrived. The wedding wasn't too big or small, attended by many of Richard's friends. Under the warm hotel lights, after the MC's jokes, she announced the bride's gift to the groom, a video of their years together. Everyone, Richard's family, friends, partners, all looked eagerly at the screen. I let go of his hand, approached the MC, and smiled. The surprise needs me to reveal. My hand holding the remote trembled slightly. I waited too long for this moment. As romantic music played, smiles spread across the guests' faces. When the video began, gasps filled the room. Richard's face turned red, like he wanted to eat me alive. He tried to grab me, but his best friend punched him to the ground. Turns out Sam couldn't keep it together. Now everyone knew. This is no fond memory at all. It's a video of Richard having an affair with his childhood friend's wife. They recorded it themselves, both smiling so happily at the camera. Gotta thank Richard for having such a hobby, otherwise, how would I have found out? There's a saying that even a rabbit doesn't eat the grass by its own burrow, but Richard just had to leave proof. How thrilling. The scene instantly turned chaotic. Everyone was gossiping and pointing fingers at the woman in the video. She covered her face and slipped away in disgrace. But the chaos didn't last long because the police arrived. Richard got taken away on charges of rape. The atmosphere reached a fever pitch again. Some people felt sorry for me, calling Richard a beast, but I just kept smiling. As Richard was being led away, unable to hit me, he just resorted to calling me every dirty name in the book. No matter how vile his words were, they couldn't hurt me one bit because I had one. Plus, someone was waiting for him at the door, his ex-wife, Selena. I heard Richard's voice from outside, filled with anger. It was you, it was you, it was you all along. The clock in the hotel lobby pointed to midnight, signaling the end of this drama, and the end of my first graduate exam. My wings were temporarily clipped. While Richard was caught up in his mess, someone anonymously sent the police a ledger. It showed Richard's involvement in money laundering and illegal loan sharking. The girl was one of his victims. I quickly moved back to campus from his place. Richard's parents hated me to the core, but they wanted the baby and pleaded for me to have the child to continue their bloodline. My belly was already showing, and sometimes I could even feel him. Life truly is amazing. Selena asked if I was really going to terminate the pregnancy. Maybe I was selfish, but I nodded without hesitation. No regrets. She said she had lost her chance to be a mother, but hoped I would reconsider. Maybe I did soften and kept the child, but that would mean being entangled with that family forever. In the end, Selena was with me when I had the abortion. It was such a tiny thing. Selena asked if she could make use of the baby, and I agreed. The implications were clear. She took the remains to Richard's parents, telling them it was indeed a grandson, the grandson they dearly wished for. From the video she brought back, Richard's mother was furious, crying and shouting, trying to beat him for being such a madman. But she didn't stop there. She told them she had been pregnant once before too, but Richard had forced her to abort. That family didn't deserve to have children. I told her there was no need to hurt herself just to get back at them, exposing her own wounds like that. Tears filled her eyes. I couldn't tell if they were from sorrow or relief. Since the divorce, everything I did was to make sure that Beast met his demise, to keep his family from finding peace. The day Richard's sentence came in was the same day my graduate exam scores were released. I wore tight clothes to see Richard. As expected, he yelled out when he saw my flat stomach, "Where's the baby?" "The baby?" I chuckled and told him that Selena had chosen a great burial plot for our son, nestled amongst the hills and waters. Hopefully, in his next life, he'd be born in a better place. I told him to reform himself, so when he got out, he could visit often. I said Selena was hurting herself to take down Richard. Wasn't I doing the same? I was selfish and cowardly. I didn't deserve to be a mother. It all finally came to an end. Later, I asked Selena how she was so sure she could take Richard down. What if I wanted to back out midway? She said she'd be there to give me a push. The following year, when graduate school started, I sent Richard a photo with just one sentence on the back. "Grad school, I got in."